This chair is much more than a piece of ornate furniture. It was the throne of one of India's most charismatic rulers. His ceremonial seat of state is intricately decorated and covered with the purest gold.
This is the throne. It makes it very clear from the material used that the occupant is the king, the Maharaja.
Known as the Golden Throne, it is an intricately fashioned work by Indian craftsmen of the 19th century.
The throne is a symbol of power, sovereignty, wealth, and as an object, it's actually very beautiful.
Made around 1818, the Golden Throne has become an icon, the exemplar of what a great Indian ruler's throne should look like, and its survival is remarkable.
Although historically we know that there are a number of fantastic thrones in existence in India, used at the time, very few survive because these thrones are usually encased in metal and sometimes encrusted with jewels. At any time of crisis, these types of objects get melted down or distributed or cut up.
It can be found in the Asian collection of the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. Its unusual form makes it especially precious. It's one of a kind.
The form of the throne is unique. There is no other prototype or object similar to it. It's not embellished with any form of precious stone or other material. The gold speaks for itself.
It is actually quite perfect in its design. It's almost the wonderful shape of the opening lotus. If you think of one floating on water, as it opens, it creates sort of cup-like shape. And that must have been in the mind of the craftsman who made it.
The importance of the Golden Throne is not only its intriguing design, but the fact that it was made for a legendary ruler, Maharaja Ranjit Singh of the Punjab. At the beginning of the 19th century, Ranjit Singh was a Sikh warrior king. From his base at the fort of Lahore, he unified under his rule the notoriously turbulent region of 5 rivers in what was then northwestern India.
He's a man of many contradictions. He's got short stature, pock-marked face, not very prepossessing appearance. At the same time, a wonderful rider and a doughty warrior who really carves not only the initial province of Punjab for himself as his own fiefdom, but also hugely enlarges it during his 40-year reign.
Ranjit Singh was blind in one eye and disfigured by smallpox suffered in childhood. In spite of these impairments, he became known in his lifetime as the Lion of the Punjab. He was an accomplished statesman and astute ruler who carefully tuned his image as an overlord.
The public persona of Ranjit Singh, like a great many rulers, is one that's characterized, for example, by large acts of public munificence, donations to religious sites. When he used to ride through the streets of Lahore on the back of an elephant, he would shower people with gold and silver coins on the occasion of major festivals.
In his public appearance, he gave the impression of a quiet ascetic. In private, he was anything but.
It has been said of Ranjit Singh that his lust for life was equal to his lust for power, and that's absolutely true.
He may have played hard, but it didn't diminish his political successes. After mounting several military campaigns, Ranjit Singh was finally appointed Maharaja of Lahore in 1801.
In subcontinental terms, it effectively means king of kings. There are lots of rajas. The Maharaja is the king over those kids. So he's a sort of king with many sub-kings beneath him, and it's the sort of ultimate title for an Indian ruler. There's no question that Ranjit Singh is a despot. He controls the state that he's created, the Punjab, entirely off his own bat. But at the same time, he's a benevolent despot. He has many different faiths and creeds under his control, but he is not a wicked ruler. He's a man who enacts many different laws that you would consider to be really quite enlightened.
The Maharaja captured the city of Lahore, now in present-day Pakistan, from the Afghans. At the time, it was the capital of the Punjab, and it was here that the throne was displayed. He set up court in the vast fort complex that was built in the 16th and 17th centuries. As befitted his new status as supreme ruler in the Punjab, there were bold demonstrations of his newly acquired supremacy and power.
There's a huge emphasis on display. We've got to remember, within a courtly context, that the king and his wives, the Maharaja and his wives and his court, wore the treasury on them. The gold of the throne really reflects the richness of the king, but also his tangible assets. It's all rather propagandist in a way, I suppose.
Ranjit Singh held court from his golden throne for 20 years. He died in 1839 from a massive stroke, probably due to too much good living. After his death, his fragile Sikh kingdom was plunged into chaos. The succession for Ranjit's throne was fought over bitterly. His son, Sher Singh, sat briefly in the golden throne as Maharaja, but then he was assassinated. The only other surviving heir was Ranjit's youngest son, Duleep. He was anointed as the last Maharaja of the Punjab in 1843.
Now, he's only 6 at the time of his succession, so you can imagine he's almost lost in this, this rather large throne, relatively speaking, for his size at the time. But he was the last ruler to sit on the throne.
His reign was all too brief. After a series of bloody battles with the British, the formidable Sikh army was finally defeated. The Punjab was formally annexed and became part of British India in March 1849. The young Maharaja Duleep was deposed and dispossessed. The great Toshakhana treasure of his father, not least the Golden Throne, became the property of the British.
It was custom that when a ruler conquered new territory, the treasury belonged to him. And so quite often in this way, gold and precious materials or objects made out of precious materials were destroyed and melted down. And it's rather remarkable in a way that Ranjit Singh's throne escaped this fate.
The story of Dalip Singh's deposition is not very edifying from the British perspective, for the simple reason that when he did the initial deal, he signed the treaty to hand over his country to the British. It was made clear that he would retain his personal wealth. Now, this, of course, never happened, and instead, the British left him simply with a pension.
The contents of Ranjit Singh's Toshakhana were itemized one by one. They were separated into lots and auctioned off, but the most valuable items were held back. The fate of the Golden Throne was placed into the hands of the Governor-General, Lord Dalhousie. He was the most important employee of the East India Company, which administered British India.
It's a sobering thought to imagine that this fabulous state that was created by Ranjit Singh in the 40 years of his rule, this huge, powerful and rich state, within just a few years of his death, is no more. And emblematic of that, of course, is the fact that the symbols of this power are shipped back to England as the booty of war.
Having got his hands on the Golden Throne, Dalhousie immediately recognized its importance, as he was a collector in his own right. He cleverly underplayed its significance to his superiors at the East India Company, in the hope that they might leave it with him. He wrote to them of the throne.
It is set apart as an object which the Court of Directors of the Company would probably desire to preserve, but as it is bulky, I shall not forward it until I receive orders to do so.
He didn't fool his superiors, though, and failed to keep the throne for himself. But he did manage to stall its departure long enough to commission his own version. He paid for a wooden replica to be made in Calcutta before the original was shipped off to Britain.
It's rather interesting that Dalhousie, the Governor-General and the victor of these campaigns against the Sikhs, should want to have a replica copy of the throne used by his vanquished enemies. And it's really symbolic, I think, of the high power of the Sikh image, you know, the glory of Ranjit Singh, the glory of his court, and the strong impression of the throne itself.
The Golden Throne finally joined the other souvenirs of Ranjit Singh's treasure in the East India Company's museum in London in 1853. Dalhousie's intention was to have his replica gilded, but it remained in mahogany at his Scottish estate. Fairly recently, it was sold at auction and snapped up by a British Sikh charity.
We paid about £7,000 in 1990 when we bought it from Sotheby's at an auction in Scotland. I have personally never sat on it because I respect it, and secondly, I protect it. To the Sikh community, it is a glaring reminder that how we lost our Sikh kingdoms and Sikh sovereignty. We feel happy that it's in our possession and custody because it links the past Sikh sovereignty to the present and hopefully to the future, you know, when the Sikhs may become a sovereign nation again.
The Golden Throne was eventually transferred from the East India Company's museum to the galleries in South Kensington, which later became the Victoria and Albert Museum. Ranjit Singh's son, Duleep, was arguably as much a possession of the East India Company as was the Golden Throne. The British government allowed him to keep his title of Maharaja, but he was exiled from India and sent to England in 1850. Here he lived as an English country gentleman, albeit perhaps a disgruntled one.
I think it's rather poignant to imagine that on some rainy day he wanders down the street towards the South Ken Museum, enters the museum, and stands face to face with what effectively was the symbol of his power, his lost power, the Golden Throne.
Even today, the Golden Throne still exudes a sense of the power of the man who once ruled from it.
It was an archetype of a throne. It represented more than any other ruler's throne.
The throne becomes an iconic symbol not just of itself, but of the man who commissioned it, Ranjit Singh. It just is a tour de force of craftsmanship geared to purpose. The net result is it's awe-inspiring.
Next on BBC4, crisis at Kelburn Castle in Ayrshire.